Hello, Atlanta. All right. How's everybody doing today? We're good. My name's Kass Dawson, as I said. I work with a company called Softbank Robotics. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of Softbank Group. I would show of hands, I'm curious, has anyone heard of or know Softbank? Got it. And do you know what's, again, show of hands, those people that had their hands up, who knows what Softbank does? Kind of, sort of, right. So we're here to talk about smart cities and rethinking what's smart. One of the questions that we always get when we talk about SoftBank is it must be a bank, right? It is actually not a bank. And the reason I'm going into this, I'll make the connection and you'll understand what the vision of SoftBank and SoftBank Group is. SoftBank is actually the largest company that you have never, or if you have heard of, it's the 36th largest company in the world. What does that mean? What do they do? We'll start on the far right-hand side of the screen. SoftBank Group has made a ton of their money in telecommunications. They are, for all intents and purposes, the Verizon or AT&T of Japan. But the SoftBank Group also has created, they've acquired a bunch of companies, they've invested in a bunch of companies, and they've also created two of the largest venture capital firms in the world underneath the Vision Fund. Companies that they've invested in or acquired, you have seen them in your daily life. Companies like Uber, WeWork. How many people used Uber to get here today? We did, yes, perfect. These are all companies that they invest in. Whoa, that's no good. That is unfortunate. What we had on that slide before is talking about SoftBank started as a software company, evolved into connectivity and telecommunications, as I said, and the founder, Masayoshi-san, has always had a vision of driving towards eventually creating smart cities. And so through his investment strategy, what you see is he's invested in a bunch of companies that will ultimately play a role in the development and creation of smart cities. Whether that's collection of data, whether that's connecting things, or whether that are some of the services like automated cars, autonomous driving, or the Brain OS, or Boston Dynamics, which is robotics. The other piece of it is Softbank Robotics. That's the company that I work for. At Softbank Robotics, we're all about augmenting the existing workforce through automation. That's important for smart cities because robotics is going to be the force that helps drive towards smart cities. Show of hands, how many people have ever heard of the robot Pepper? It's a 4-foot-tall humanoid robot. That's our robot. We've deployed that in a number of spaces, whether that be hospitality, banking, retail, healthcare, a number of things. And what that robot is doing is really helping to alleviate some of the menial or mundane tasks that people do to help automate them. And again, that's ultimately what's going to drive towards a smart city. The other thing that we're doing, and we've brought here today, is an autonomous vacuum sweeper. That's our product, Wizz. That will be launching later this year. That is for cleaning big industrial spaces like this. It's also for hospitality. It's for airports. It's going to be in businesses, for office spaces, et cetera. That'll be our next product. We're also supporting a bunch of different robotics companies from the standpoint of helping them either deploy or helping them with parts submissions or what have you. Ultimately, as I said, the vision and dream is artificial intelligence and trying to drive towards a smart city and being able to enable and empower a smart city. What's important to realize with a lot of these companies that are being invested in, a lot of startups, from a software standpoint, companies fail at a 90% rate. Hardware fails at 97% rate, and robotics, as we know, is failing at a 99% rate. The reason that's important is as we're here looking at all of these tools, all of these new ideas, how are we going to empower smart cities, robotics is a critical component of empowering and driving a smart city. If these companies are failing at a 99% rate, it's going to be very difficult for us to truly create a smart city. And that's where a company like SoftBank comes in with massive amounts of investment to help ensure that these robotics companies are succeeding. And that's what our role is in this whole space. So how do we start a truly smart city? As I mentioned before, we first launched an autonomous robot, a 4-foot-tall humanoid robot built for interaction, and that's really complicated. What we learned from deploying that and putting that out in the marketplace is it's the challenge of getting people to understand how to interact with it, the challenge of getting businesses to appreciate so that it actually starts playing a role as a human in the workforce. It's very difficult to do. And so we've realized over the time that from a robotics standpoint, you need to start with some of the more mundane, menial tasks. What are the really easy things to do that staff doesn't really want to do and we can start to empower through automation? That's why we started with this autonomous vacuum cleaner. We have it here today. I suggest you take a look at it. It's pretty interesting the way it does it. It's not like a Roomba. The human teaches it first how to work, and then it memorizes that path and does it over and over again and will avoid obstacles as they come into play. So the way we look at where a smart city starts is from the bottom up, not from the top down. A lot of things that are here, a lot of these ideas, a lot of these startups that may not make it, as I showed on the slide previously, that's really top down. That's big idea. We think that this is a great way to create a smart city. For us, we look at it more of how do you actually deploy things, start from the ground up, individual executions of things. So I talked about what types of businesses can we start to empower now through automation so that we're driving towards the future of what smart cities could be. Starting with things that you see as urban cornerstones of everyday life. In banking, we've got our humanoid robot to serve as a device that helps provide people information on what's actually happening in the bank, what are the products that they could use, and it's ultimately there to help cut down on the line. The success that we've seen with it, we've cut line time down for that client, HSBC, from an average of 4 minutes to 1 minute. We've also seen that because the robot is providing information, they've been able to grow their new business 60% year over year. And that's through automation. It's also helping their tellers be able to step in with an understanding of what those people are looking for. So it's not really about taking jobs, it's about up-leveling the jobs that their existing tellers have, making that relationship a little bit better, and they've learned a lot of things through that deployment. One of the companies that we've worked with, this second picture up there, the tall robot that's going down the aisle, that's in retail stores, that's an inventory tracker. Right now, with human workforce, stores take time out of their day to have employees walking up and down the aisle and doing an inventory checking. And the amount of time that it takes them to do that, whether it's taking out of their day or they do that at best once a week. And it's not the best way to truly check your inventory. This robot goes 3 times a day, up and down aisles. And as I mentioned before, this is one of the companies that we partner with, and we're helping to empower and get them to deploy out into the marketplace. The next one is that R2-D2 looking robot. That's our Wizz. That's the autonomous vacuum sweeper. Again, going from very complex with the human interaction to just let me vacuum for you so that the staff can go out and focus on other things that will really help make that cleaning experience better. Lots of complaints that businesses or office spaces have is the cleaning staff didn't really do a great job. They didn't do this or that. They only have so much time. The vacuum sweeper will take care of that time so the staff can do some of those other things, cleaning the kitchen, cleaning the bathroom, cleaning other spaces, and making sure the office is really, really clean. That's what automation is really about right now, is making sure that jobs can be improved, people's happiness can be improved, et cetera, and that's what we're driving to. The last one there is another robot that we have called Now, and what we've seen with our humanoid robots is a tremendous amount of success in getting people, young kids, excited about getting into STEM. Everybody here know what STEM stands for? STEM, anyone? It is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But that's not the be-all to end-all in terms of the future and where all of this is going. How do we drive to a proper future of smart cities? Education is another initiative that we're really keen on, and we think is critical because as these jobs begin to evolve, as work starts to change and what it starts to look like, we need to make sure that the future workforce is empowered to be able to do these jobs, to be able to manage the robots, program the robots, and other things of that nature. So what we've seen with our humanoid robots is kids get way more excited because they get to see immediately the results of what they're programming. One of the issues that we've seen with programming and keeping kids involved in STEM is their confidence gets wrecked when they start coding, hit enter, and all they get is an error message. With the humanoid robot, we've seen success because you hit enter and the robot does and says things. The other thing is, from a cultural standpoint, you can make the robot say and do things that you would say and do. So there isn't necessarily a cultural barrier keeping people from engaging and really having a good time with it. So we've heard of STEM. Some people even call it STEAM. I think for us, it's more about STREAM. Adding robotics and art into the STEM is really kind of be where the future of all of this goes. One of the questions that I always get when we talk about automation, we talk about smart cities, and all these things that are going on here that you'll see is you're replacing jobs. You are literally taking jobs away from people, so what are they going to do for a living? How do you manage that? How do you cope with the fact that you're working in an industry that's replacing people's jobs? They say that 75 million jobs are going to be replaced by robots or automation in the next 10 years. I don't think that's necessarily true. And that's where education begins to play a really critical role and why it's important as well for what we're doing. Because there's going to be 122 million new jobs created by automation, as I mentioned before. Whether that is managing these automation devices, whether that is programming those automation devices. So that's 58 million more jobs than are what are being replaced. With that education initiative, we're also focused on trying to make sure that the existing workforce is getting trained as well, so that they too can be prepared for these changes. So in essence, we're all here today in Atlanta to learn and see where smart cities are going to go. What is this ultimately going to be about? Again, for us, it's starting from the ground, starting to define what those opportunities are. Low-level, menial tasks, redundant tasks, manage that, learn from that, leverage the data that is being collected, really build up that artificial intelligence to continue to expand and grow and move forward. That's really the only way a smart city can actually happen. Again, big ideas, poorly funded startups is not necessarily the way that's going to get us there. We have to be focused on and embrace the fact that these things are happening. It's all coming. We're all here today to celebrate the fact that smart cities are coming. So as you see these things, embrace that, get involved, start to figure out what role can you play, what role can your company play, how can you start to think about education and help empower what the future is going to be, because that's how a truly smart city can be, that will be the foundation of a truly smart city and ultimately be how we get to the success of smart cities. With that, I'm done. I have time for questions. If anybody has questions for me or would like to know a little bit more about what we're doing or what we're thinking, I'm happy to answer. Anyone? Yes. Yes. Right. So the question is, when somebody's managing devices or robots, what type of title is that? So the job descriptions have come up. When we are deploying our robots, we've seen people take on titles. They create fancy titles for themselves, right? And what's interesting is, in the example of the cleaning robot, you're literally somebody who is today a janitor or a custodian. And when you go home, when it's what do my parents do at work? And there's not a ton of pride in some of those menial jobs. Now those people can go and say, I'm a robot manager. I manage the robot. And what we've seen is in certain instances, people have done that. They've actually changed their badge and said, I am now the robot manager at a Walmart or at the bank or whatever the case may be. So it's up-leveling that job because it's no more just I'm the one that runs the scrubber or the vacuum sweeper around. I'm actually controlling the device that does it. So it's improving happiness on the job front. It's improving job retention, which has been an issue. And it's also, by replacing some of those menial tasks, it's also dealing with the labor issue. There's not enough labor to do some of those tasks. So there's a bunch of benefits that come out of that. Yes, sir. So the question is, with all of the robotics that are going to be coming from smart cities or smart agriculture, as you referenced, these big devices are going to require power sources, and is power an issue? So that's the question that you're asking. So one of the challenges that we face, I'll give you our example, with our robots, and they're not massive devices by any stretch of the imagination. They're like 60 pounds at most. Is the battery, because it becomes hazardous material, and it's tough to ship. They also, the lifetime of that battery, so we provide more batteries to folks so they can swap them out in time. The issue is, as power sources begin to increase, as we start to grasp at what solar energy can bring and find ways to do that, I think that will improve. But for now, these lithium-ion batteries are, at that scale, it is a little bit of a challenge. There are issues, but they're finding ways to improve that. From the standpoint of being able to power agricultural equipment, like large-scale equipment, I don't think 20 years, probably 5 to 10 at most. Yeah. Yes, anybody else? Go ahead. So we, from a fleet we have our own fleet services team that manages our robots, but they have and party with some third-party vendors to help manage in the shipping or get out into the field, because we are not as large as we would like to be yet. We're growing, so we do rely on some third-party sources, yes. Yes, sir. The question was, do we do work in smart businesses and process automation? I think for ourselves, we try to do that, and as we find solutions, so if you saw the broader spectrum of all the investments that Softbank is making, Softbank Robotics, we see ourselves as the brain to try and connect all of these things. We're creating the source that will help to connect what's being learned from an autonomous driving vehicle to what's being learned from the vacuum sweeper to what's being learned from a humanoid robot, so that all that information starts to drive to a more robust artificial intelligence that can power a smart city. From the standpoint of a business's automation, it's not really our bailiwick. We don't really focus on that. But it is, as we learn things and do things for ourselves, we'll begin to figure out how can we share that with other companies. Yes, sir. That's okay. It is, yes. So the questions about the manufacturing of our equipment, do we do it ourselves or do we farm it out? We farm it out. The humanoid robots are built by Foxconn, same people that make the iPhone, for those that don't know. Our vacuum sweeper is being made by a company called ICE. That's their specialty, is in cleaning equipment, so we are working with them. So we farm a lot of that out. We do the development, the creation, the ideation, R&D in-house, and then farm it out to other companies to help us get the scale that we need. So the question is, what is the challenge for actually achieving full-on automation in robotics? What do we as Softbank Robotics see as that challenge? Yes, it is talent, and yes, it is technology. It's both. Artificial intelligence, as much as we want to talk about it, is not quite there yet. I always give the example of the smartwatches, or a recommendation when you're typing an email, here's what I recommend you should say. That's the best. That's what Google has to offer. That's what Apple has to offer. And I always feel like it's not even close to what I would actually need to say. And so we're really far from a technology standpoint, and I would argue that that's tied to the labor, right? Right now, there's such a shortage and need for engineers that they can't hire fast enough, especially coming out of US students and even global population of who can and provide the right solutions and information, who can work on it. That's why we're focusing really heavily on education as well. Any other questions? And I am just out of time. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. It's been wonderful. Have a great day. Enjoy the show.